Howdy, howdy, fellow movie fans, and welcome back to another edition of the ONETA Show, brought to you by PTE Creative. As always, we are your hosts, Evan Davies, and our favorite bald movie expert of the internet, even though apparently the Cole Sprouse haters can't stand him. It's Dylan Davies.
Can't have them all.
Alrighty, we are recording for the first time in a month because I always give inside baseball on this. I've returned from a 3 week long excursion to Alaska, completely recharged, completely in sync with the world. But nonetheless, here we are. We are continuing our
More insane.
more in sync. We are continuing our big box office series, and we have landed on one of my favorite films of all time because we have 2008's The Dark Knight. And may I just say this? I don't know how it's possible. I forgot how good this. I knew it was tippy top, but it's like going back and watching tape of Jordan in '96 and '97, where you just go,
Yeah,
"Holy fuck, is he good?" Like it's like watching Kobe when Kobe's just like it's
yeah.
it's watching
It,
Mahomes in a Super Bowl in the fourth quarter, just going bam, 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 bam. It's insane.
it had been at least 5 years since I'd seen it last, so yeah, it was fun rewatching it because there are things I forgot about it.
It, it. We said this about Raiders of the Lost Ark, that there's Raiders may be the only perfect movie I've ever seen. I'm revising that statement. I think The Dark Knight's a perfect.
It's definitely close, yeah.
It's
Well, I mean, it's number three on IMDb's top 250,
it's
which is crazy to think about.
that's insane. But if you want a master class in writing, this is it. There is not a single ounce of fat on this movie
I
whatsoever.
will say there's only one little part that I dislike a little bit, and it's the very beginning because it's a little too exposition-y. But I feel like that's not actually Nolan's fault. I feel like that's a lot of studio notes where it's like, oh, they need to be explained. They need to explain this more. But it's like the audience will understand it. Just let it play out.
I think that's a great place to jump in. Let's just go over um, let's just go over like we normally do and take care of business. The opening in this film is I keep writing in my notes fucking phenomenal on like every single scene.
Yeah, I wrote down top 10 opening of all time, maybe.
Uh, The thing is this I can understand the critique of too much exposition. I don't think it's that. I think that's legend building. I think that's world building at its finest, in which
Sure.
you have all these guys in the planet. By the way, let's do our usual spoiler alert ahead, even though the movie is nearing 20 years old, which is insane to say. But um, this movie came out while we were in high school. Um, this come out when you were a
Not me.
freshman. I was just saying this came out right before your freshman year, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Um,
Actually, this was the first movie I saw in theaters where people spontaneously gave it a standing ovation afterward
wow. Okay.
at the midnight screening.
I mean,
I
it
think we
was.
went to different screenings of it.
We may have. I don't recall
I
that
think
one
so.
because I know we did Dark Knight Rises together, but I don't know if we did Dark Knight together. But I was
Yeah,
losing my fucking mind for this trilogy, and rightfully so, because Batman's my guy, and this is upon rewatch, this is the best comic book movie, hands down,
yeah. I think that's safe to say.
hands down. And that's from someone who's let it kind of slip in his mind because I'm like, oh well, it's this or it's this and this. A lot of people would like to save some of these comments for the end of a show to hook you. I'm not trying to do that. I'm just trying to be honest with our audience right away. This movie's so fucking incredible about setting up character and building tension, and it's done from the first second the movie's on. That Zimmer score hits immediately, and you are into world building at its finest with tension, where you have all these criminals coming in and they're just world building for the Joker, and they're building the mystique of the Joker. Where,
Mm.
the exposition, I could understand someone saying, I think that's slightly flawed. I would just disagree because I think it's far more of the classic fantasy outlaw style of, oh, he did this, oh, he did this, he did this, but it's done with such reverence, and you're seeing character work at the same time where they're like, oh, well, boss said he doesn't need you anymore, so I kill you. Oh, the boss said I don't, and just bam, bam,
I,
bam, 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 bam.
I'm not talking about when they're talking about the Joker. I more mean like when they're asking each other, "Oh, are you done?" You know, where like they're doing a task, and then as soon as they're done with that task, they kill them.
Yeah,
Like, I think they could have just cut all dialogue from that. But I mean, that's a nitpick, like the smallest nitpick.
yeah. I could understand it. I maybe if you're gonna cut some of them, I could see it. I think you need one at the very least. Uh,
Sure.
just so boss said when you're done, done. Um, you know, I think that would have been fine. But yeah, it's hi Lupin. Um, for our video viewers, as Lupin comes to the back. Um, but the pacing at which this is done, you feel the tension of a bank heist immediately, where you're just like, oh, we're here, we're going, like, and you're clutching your chair immediately because of how fast this movie is moving.
It's funny how bank heists are like one of those things that are just like automatically interesting.
Yeah,
Like, no matter what, they're automatically fun to watch.
as long as it's told well. Yeah, where like you can just tell
Yeah,
someone bank heist movie and they're like, all right, okay, I'll watch it.
yeah. Like even a mediocre one like Inside Man, it's still like, it's still fun to watch.
Yeah, it's still fun. Um, but I just think the intro the intro is so smart because it shows that the Joker is not just a mad dog. He is uber intelligent. That he's meticulously
Well,
planning every single detail, every single way.
yeah, the thing I noticed during this rewatch was the thing that makes the Joker so great is like you never know what he's gonna do next.
Nope.
Like everything he does is just like I don't. He's on screen and I don't know what he's gonna do next.
Yeah, yeah. I have it.
Like when he puts that grenade in the guy's mouth, William Fichtner's mouth,
Yeah,
and then the string just starts walking away with him. You're like, what the fuck is that? But like, you're still trying to figure it out. He's always like a step ahead of everyone,
yeah. Well,
including the audience.
I have this written down for later notes. Is use the character traits to your advantage, and this movie does that entirely. Use those character traits to tell your story and give you an advantage. The Joker inherently is a liar. He is inherently a trickster. Use that to your advantage instead of it being like, oh, he's funny, or oh, he's this, or oh, he's that. Let him do that in a way that is unhinged and crazed, but take advantage of the fact that he's constantly lying, he's constantly scheming, saying being a hypocrite. That's the point of the Joker. Is he's like everyone's like, oh, he's this honest, true, fair thing. He's not. He's and honest from the sense of he's crazy. That's not the Joker at all. This is a perfect interpretation in terms of the character of the Joker, in which his lies constantly are building and building and building to get you somewhere and take you completely different. And they're using those character traits to their advantage. And I love that he's just shown to kill everyone, and you're like, oh, he's gonna blow this guy up, and then it's just like, no, it's just a knockout gas. How does he get away? It's going to be crazy. He just drives a school bus into the fucking bank and then just pulls into a school bus lane, and you're just like, and he just drives away, and you're like,
Yeah,
how's that even
I
possible?
know. I know one of the criticisms of this is always like, oh, the Joker's plan is always so like convenient. But I'm always just like, I don't care if I'm enjoying watching it and it's playing out in a realistic enough way,
Yeah.
then I don't. Who cares? I don't. I hate the logic flaws and like sometimes yeah, stuff is too like Madam Web is a perfect example of like the logic flaws are too big.
Right.
But like in this, nothing's too big to where it's like, okay, I can't believe that.
Well, in what way are people coming at Joker for
Like
this one?
it's like, oh, he meant to get arrested. He perfectly plans the bomb to go off, so he won't get hurt, but everyone else will. You know, stuff like that.
Nah, I don't see that at
Yeah,
all.
exactly. I'm just like, it doesn't bother me at all.
No, and people can argue plot armor. I would disagree with that entirely. This movie is nothing plot armor based. It's nothing. It shows how flawed everybody is and really picks them up. And
Yeah,
and I
every character, every main character has real flaws.
yeah.
I
And
like the only ones that don't are like Alfred and
Lucius.
Lucius.
Yeah, and they're and
But
they
like,
and they're tertiary characters. They're
yeah,
meant
exactly.
to those characters are meant to be. It's ironic even when you bring those guys up that they are they're even diametrically opposed even though they're not even though they're on the same side. Where like Alfred saying later on, oh, when at the beginning of the third act, when Bruce is at his wits' end and he's lost everything in his mind, how'd you catch the band? And he's like, we burned the forest down. He's like, we just did the worst thing we possibly could to make sure that the top worst thing that could happen stopped. So we just took
Mm-hmm.
everything out with it. And then you have Lucius who's going, this is way too costly, and I won't be a part of it. I'll help you once because this guy has to be stopped, and you've already built it, so I'm at your whims.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to do that. And it's fun how even they're diametrically opposed, and there's tension within characters that A normally don't have tension, but B create character tension throughout. And like if you want a word to describe this movie, it's tension. There is so much tension. There's so much friction between characters in scenes. Um, like, do you really believe anybody's anybody's friend in this? Maybe Batman
Yes,
and
I
Gordon.
believe.
Maybe Batman and Gordon.
I believe. I believe Bruce and Alfred are,
Yeah, I can see.
but that's more like almost father and son, almost
Yeah, the
like
only
surrogate
ones
father.
I can really see being, in terms of friends that have a lot of tension between them, because like I buy Rachel and Harvey. I buy that. Um, I buy Lucius and Bruce as friends. But then when you get to like the main core of the three, I buy that Gordon is friends with Batman or trusts him. But he's always like,
Mm-hmm.
but then as things start to break, he's like, I don't know, should I? And that's the beauty of this, where you're constantly buying into the relationship because they have to. You have to buy in, and I may have
Yeah,
just been a slightly contradictory statement that I made, but you believe that all of them care for and trust one another in some way, shape, or form, but yet they don't trust them. It's very interesting.
the one. This is gonna sound. Never mind. I'll skip it. It was gonna sound really mean. I'll skip it.
Okay, that's fair. Um, as we move through this,
Oh, I actually did want to ask you a question though.
sure.
Isn't it an odd choice that they decided to destroy the entire Wayne Manor in the first movie? Like such an iconic like place, and like the Batcave pretty much won't be in the trilogy because of that.
Yeah. I mean, it's a choice I disagree with, but it's a choice that I think works for them because there's a run and a period of Batman in like the 70s, and then they go back to it in the Grant Morrison era, like the early 10s, in which that's when it's Dick Grayson's Batman and Damian Wayne is Robin. So a little bit different. That was intentional change for characters. Where the penthouse is a thing in the 70s, and they have the cave.
Okay.
They have the cave in the bottom of the building. It's not a cave; it's
Yeah.
just a bunker, really. Um, but it's more of the 70s. How are we adapting? Well, isn't it logical if the guy's constantly in the city that he would want to be in the city to do it?
Yeah. I suppose
I
that makes sense. Yeah.
it's a logical turn, but it's not a fun character turn because like
Yeah.
when you look at superheroes, if you break down everything and just chop it up, a lot of the stuff that's loved and iconic, you kind of go. If you're looking to nitpick, if you're looking to think about it, you just kind of go, not really that smart. Like, why would he? Why would they do that? Why is she doing that? Why there? But at the same time, they're iconic pieces to show the character, and that's what I like about it. And the thing is this: I sat down and watched this. Ab joined me, or was watching pretty much the whole time, and we watched Dark Knight Rises right after. Um, she's like, "Oh, we're watching Dark
I
Knight
watched
Rises, right?" And I was like,
I watched Logan right after.
"Logan,
Yeah.
interesting." I mean, it's kind of the Dark Knight
It
of
was a
X
good double
Men.
feature.
It's a hell of a double feature. Um, we watched Dark Knight Rises right after this, and I think the Batcave missing during the Dark Knight actually is a pretty smart choice. Although I disagree with it because it immediately shows this like things are moving, things are changing without it actually needed to be said. It just sets the atmosphere more where you're like, oh, this is weird. This is strange. This is oh, we're here now.
I
Oh,
guess
we're here now. We're here now.
just like on a purely like word association way, if you have to think of a location when you say the word Batman,
It's the
most
Batcave.
people are going to say Batcave,
Yeah.
and it's like such an iconic thing that it's weird that it's like only in part of the first movie.
Yeah, it's in the first movie and it's in the third movie. It's barely in the third movie. Um,
Yeah, I was going to say I don't remember it at all in Rises.
he's in a lot of the. It's the Batcave is in the first act of The Dark Knight Rises, and it's him doing the detective work on Selina and Bane. And
Okay.
again, it's used really wisely, location wise, because it's used to show that Bruce can't move on, can't get past it, and even though his life is in shambles and literally everything in his life is crumbling, and he's still clinging to the cave, and then magically, when the cave stops, that's when everything starts moving forward. So it's one of those things where if you're paying attention, you're like, oh, that's a really smart choice. But at the same time, it's used for hope at the end as well because spoiler alert on the Dark Knight Rises. There's a new Batman at the end of it, theoretically, and
Oh yeah, I
and
forgot about that part.
and Robin, John Blake, is led to the Batcave, and it's essentially it's teased like, oh well, he's the new protector. Um,
hmm
but that's the only times the Batcave is used. So it is a really interesting it's a really interesting question to look at, because you just kind of go, when you're thinking about it, you're like, you don't think about the Batcave at all in the Dark Knight, and then when you're like sitting back, you're like, wait, what?
It's just weird when you think of the whole trilogy.
And it's also sad in a way as a fan, because they found such a smart use for it to figure out
Yeah.
why that infrastructure would be there, why, and it shows Bruce's ideals and where he got them from without having to go over it all the time. Where it's one
Mm-hmm.
line. He's like, you're he's like, your ancestors were part of the Underground Railroad. They built this to help people. That's why this exists. And it's in really bad shape, but it can still be used. And Bruce figures it out, and he's like, that cave. It's great. I can hide everything here. Nothing's like, but it's so
Yeah, and
logical.
they found a new way of like portraying it too.
Yeah,
That was totally different.
right.
So
And it
it would have
worked
been nice to
logically.
see it, I think.
Yeah, I would have preferred it, obviously. And again, it's so funny that now we're asking questions and saying I would have preferred this, as if this movie is flawed, and it's not.
No, yeah, exactly.
But it's just a fun, like, it's like in Avengers Endgame. It's like, oh, I wish that guy would have been there. You're like, well, yeah, no shit, but really, you're getting all the Avengers that
Yeah.
have ever existed in the MCU together, and you're still gonna like, yeah, would I've loved to see Wolverine there? Of course I would have. Would I have loved to see, Gambit and some of the other X Men there? Of course. And Namor and so many other characters that they didn't have possession of when they started the MCU. Of course I would have seen that. But it doesn't take away the beauty and the quality of that scene when they're all there.
Yeah.
So it is interesting. Um, like, going back though, I don't see a single flaw in the first act. This movie's so fast. It is moving at breakneck speed.
Yeah.
I mean, my notes
Yeah,
are,
there's not like I was one of the notes I had down is even if the script wasn't that great, which it actually is,
yeah.
um, but even if it wasn't, this cast is insane. Like they would be able to pull off any
Oh yeah.
because like even just like the bit players are Morgan Freeman, Michael Caine, Maggie Gyllenhaal, Aaron Eckhart. And it's like that's a pretty great round cast to round it out.
Well, if you're looking at actor talent, and Maggie Gyllenhaal and Aaron Eckhart are your sixth and seventh player, that's a pretty
Yeah,
remarkable cast. Where, you know Eckhart was the one going in that I was just like, because as a kid, you hear the stories and you're not comprehending everything. Heath Ledger was the wild card going into this, because everyone's like, "Oh, Brokeback Mountain's gonna be the Joker now," and never saw Brokeback Mountain prior to this. Still haven't seen Brokeback Mountain. I know it's a
hey, it's a great movie.
I know it's a great movie.
Great movie.
I know it's a great movie. I have nothing wrong with anyone who wants to watch it or see it. Um, it's just like, when I go back and track movies, Brokeback Mountain's not at the top of my list to go track it down. It's just not what I go and with my time fill with movies. I fill it with a lot of familiar favorites or stuff that's adjacent to that. Um, but Heath Ledger gives the performance of a decade in this film.
Yeah, the thing I wrote down about Heath Ledger is had he survived longer, I think for like our generation, like millennials, he would have been that icon. You know how like there's like Paul Newman, Elizabeth Taylor,
Yep.
those huge that one person where it's like I think he would have been that, especially after The Dark Knight came out.
Well,
Like
yeah.
he's pretty much already there because I've never met anyone in our age group who doesn't know who Heath Ledger is.
Yeah, I mean, it's another one of those classic gone too soon kind of things, but
Mm-hmm.
he's kind of got that James Dean vibe where if you look at James Dean did 3 movies, but he just was exactly what that time period needed for that audience and became an icon for years and years and years, and the people that then go back and watch it continue the status where they just go, I get it. Where like when James Dean acts in Rebel Without a Cause, it's the old style, old Hollywood way of acting. It's way over the top. It's way
Well, it was radical back then
right, but it's way over the top, classic style, but it's
compared to
still
now.
radical.
Sure.
But yet there is something to it where when I go back and watch Rebel Without a Cause, or Giant, or East of Eden, and I watch his performance, there's just this magnetism that's you can tell he's special from the moment you lay eyes on him. And
Mm-hmm.
Ledger with the Joker, you immediately are like, there's something about him that's special. There's just something
Well,
that
just the amount of raw charisma Heath Ledger has is insane.
yeah,
Like it, and I not even just in the movies. I like in interviews and stuff I've seen with him. He is just so charismatic and likable immediately. Like there's just something about him that you just inherently like.
yeah. And that's the funny part is this movie was remembered for his performance, rightfully so. And yet
Mm-hmm.
Christian Bale's working his ass off as a phenomenal Batman and Bruce Wayne. Where he's like the funny part that people don't understand sometimes is when you play Batman, you do not play one character, you play two. Uh,
Well, no, I wrote down he's actually playing three characters in my mind. He's playing Bruce, the rich asshole.
yep,
Bruce, Bruce, like the protector, like
the actual
who's
Bruce Wayne.
the real Bruce,
Yeah,
yeah, and then Batman.
yeah. And where does all three of those meld together? That's the beauty of this take. The beauty of Batman in general, but it's the beauty of this take specifically is you're right. There's three Batman, or there's three characters to Batman, but they all have to feed Batman. They can't
Yeah,
feed.
and they all need to be cohesive in some way.
Yes, and when he's when he's Bruce Wayne and he's an asshole, he still ends up doing something that's right. Like when you look at the things he does wrong as an asshole, they're like stereotypical playboy things that you're like, does it really hurt anybody if he does that? No. Like going away
Yeah,
with the entire ballet, it's just kind of like, oh no, a ballet got canceled.
but the thing I realized during this rewatch was like all that like the front that Bruce puts on really
Yeah.
because like it for the public he is Bruce Wayne, the rich millionaire fucking asshole.
Yes.
Like he is such a douche at times
Yeah.
during it, but like you can tell it's just a front.
Yeah. Um, and it's certainly you have Christian Bale giving the performance one of the best performances of his career, which is saying a lot because he's of the generation of films we grew up watching. He's one of the best actors this generation of actors has. Everything he
Yeah.
does, everything he does in terms of what he does specifically is gold. You buy it immediately. You're like, it's just what he is. And yet, he's overshadowed by Heath Ledger because it's so special. And
Yeah,
it's
eh,
insane.
I remember going into the Oscars. It wasn't even a question if he was going to win.
Yeah,
It was just like, okay, yeah, okay. Everyone's just accepting he won already.
right.
It's just about announcing it.
And that's the thing is it was one of those like I remember watching that Oscars and you never like no one said it because it didn't need to be said. But of course, it's the internet, so you can track it down if you really want to. Where there's always gonna be people that are gonna say, "Oh, he only won because he died." Bullshit. Like that is,
Yeah, there's no way he was gonna lose.
yeah. It's just that was the performance of all performance, and I think you're right. He would have kind of been that icon status where he could have made 12 of the worst movies of all time after this, and still everyone would have been like, fucking Heath Ledger. Let's go. And like,
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's like his past movies blew up after he died because people just craved him.
yeah.
Like a Knight's Tale is so popular with our age group because we wanted to watch him more.
Yeah, it was a niche movie for fantasy fans of a certain age. That's really what A Knight's Tale was. It
Yeah.
was it was can we do classic knights in the rap generation? It's kind of what it was. And yet
Kinda,
now
yeah.
and now when you go back and watch A Knight's Tale, it's treated with such reverence because of him, because of just his aura, and it's insane because that aura is done throughout this entire movie, where there's just a
Yeah.
magnetism to that character, and he's used so wisely that he has so much screen time, but yet he doesn't. It's strange where this movie's super balanced, but it's constantly playing the threat of what he can do and who he is and the paranoia that's brought upon Gotham because of him. Um, it's just I have written down in my notes every moment with the Joker is great show not tell. Where you think because he has great dialogue, it's like just telling you stuff, and it's not. It's showing you because it's his movements, it's his demeanor during shots. You know, when he first does do you want to know how I got these scars? You're like, oh god, like not oh god in a bad way, but you're like, oh, like if you're looking specifically through the lens of show not tell, you're like, well, don't tell us. But then when he repeats it and it's a completely different story, it's so smart because it plays upon the character, it plays upon the liar, it plays upon wild card of it all, and you just go, and
Yeah.
I also love it's a huge nod to the comic books where that's why I actually um it's not a bad movie. The Joker with Joaquin Phoenix is a good movie. I just hate that movie. I can tell you it is a good film, but I hate it because it completely but I think it not only do I think, I know it completely violates the idea of the fucking Joker. The point of the Joker is there's no origin story. It's just he is the embodiment of chaos. He is that. And then to get this tale of the origin of the Joker to me just screams studio. Like we want Joker. We want Joker.
Well, Warner Brothers is desperate, so
Right. Which is sad because they used to be by far the biggest studio in the world.
yes.
And almost every classic movie that you can think of from back in the day is pretty much Warner Brothers.
Yeah. Well, just going off of what you just said, yeah, the thing I wrote down is I think this might actually be the most deserving Oscar win of all time, purely because every single second he's on screen is electric. Like it, you can't help but just be fascinated by him. Like obviously, there's great performances. You know, Daniel Day Lewis has given many.
yeah.
Just the year before, Javier Bardem as Anton Chigurh in No Country for Old Men, which is another like top 5 villains of all time,
Yeah.
and somehow Heath Ledger tops him.
Oh yeah.
It's crazy. it's like somehow I don't know if it's Heath Ledger who wrote his own dialogue. I don't know if he did that or not, or if it's one of the Nolan brothers. But one of them has the eerie ability to sound perfectly like a psychopath and a sociopath. It's eerie how real the Joker feels.
Well, I also think it's a testament to honesty. Like
Yeah,
when you watch a Christopher Nolan movie, whether you go back to all of his catalog in his earlier times to now with Oppenheimer, there is just such an earnest honesty to the characters that he writes and directs. You know, Jonathan Nolan's on a lot of his pieces, his brother, which is really smart. You know, everyone's got that team, and his brother is with him for the majority of his stuff, rightfully so. But when Christopher Nolan makes a movie, you cannot say the characters are not earnest and honest portrayals of exactly what they're supposed to be. You don't go into it going like, I don't know, man. Like even like
yeah,
Interstellar. Interstellar has some flaws in terms of like overall plot where it's hard to follow from time to time, like the grandeur. But when you look at McConaughey, that is such an earnest portrayal of that person in that situation.
yeah.
And
The thing I was,
Dunkirk is the same way. Tenet, even
yeah,
though Tenet is flawed, Tenet's the exact same way. Um, you know, all the Batman trilogy is like that. The Prestige is like that in spades. What an underrated movie. But it, and Oppenheimer just won an Oscar for being one of the greatest epics of this era. You know, so like,
the the thing I always say about Nolan is he's not a flashy filmmaker. He's more an efficient and
oh yeah,
effective filmmaker.
oh yeah,
He's not like he's not like I'm trying to think of like he's not Quentin Tarantino where his dialogue is flashy and it's out there and there it's specific.
yeah,
Like Nolan's is getting to a point where the audience needs to understand something about a character. What's the quickest way to understand that?
yeah. He
It
is,
needs to be efficient.
just to give a nice tie into another one of our podcasts, the ONETA Football Show. He's the Bill Belichick of directors,
Hmm.
where it's about the success of the whole. It's not about the success of.
Yes.
And if you can do your job, if if Christian Bale can do his job as Batman, that's going to serve Michael Caine's Alfred. That's going to serve Heath Ledger's Joker. Same deal. If Heath can do his job as the Joker, that makes Christian better. That makes Michael better. That makes Aaron Eckhart better. Like all of them get better because the single performances. It's certainly something. It's crazy that you brought it up because I'm following an account called Outstanding Screenplays. I can't remember if it's on Instagram or YouTube, but they do a lot of short clips. There was an interview with Gary Oldman that has completely influenced how I look at directing now.
Oh, I think I know this clip.
And he's just like, in my entire time with Christopher Nolan on the three Batman movies, I got two notes. And one was Christopher Nolan just walking up and saying, there's more at stake here. That's it. He didn't go, I'm looking for you to do this, and you got to really. He's just. And Gary Oldman's like, I don't need to know everything in the world. I don't need to. He's just like, I just need to be in that moment
Yeah.
to tell what that person needs to do. And
Yeah, that's such an efficient way to boil down a scenario.
yeah, and you know, for a teaser for future projects, we're working on some. We're working on a lot of original stuff and pieces of fiction that's original to us. And I'm gonna have to sit there and like when people are doing those things, going like, what do I want from them? I need to be able to be in the seat and direct them, and I don't want to have to do the no. I want you to do it this way because I'm like, You want to be Christopher Nolan. Hey, there's more here. Could you give me?
Well, yeah, and that's not an easy thing to do.
No.
Like, it's so easy to fall into overwriting and over directing and over explaining stuff, and that's why Christopher Nolan is a genius,
Yeah.
and he's probably the best working director nowadays. I would say he's taken the mantle of Steven Spielberg
I don't.
as that.
I don't think it's a question. He is, because now when Spielberg makes a movie, in no way, I don't think Spielberg makes bad movies. But
No, yeah,
when you go into a Spielberg movie, you're going in because it's a Spielberg movie. Most of the time, it's not because you've been drawn in because this is a can't miss movie, or this is a
yeah. Well, the thing is, like early Spielberg, like Raiders, E.T., and then going into the '90s, Jurassic Park, Schindler's List, like those were events, and that's what Christopher Nolan feels like now.
oh, I mean,
Is
that's
like
the thing.
every single movie is an event.
I mean, it's such an event that it turned entire streaming services and studios on their head when Christopher Nolan literally said, "No, you're not going to release Tenet on streaming services," and HBO said, "No, we are." Like Warner Brothers said, "No, we are," and it's completely reversed the fortunes of it. Even worse for Warner Brothers and for now Universal, where I don't know what the deal is with Nolan's company and studios anymore. I can't remember if it was a one-off for Universal to get Oppenheimer or if he just signed a whole deal. Just well, that's one of the biggest losses in modern movie history is to not have Christopher Nolan in your wheelhouse, because that's something Warner Brothers always could have just said. Worst comes to worst, we got Chris. Just let him make a movie.
Yeah,
We'll make $1 billion. It'll be fine. But
and the thing is, yeah, Warner's was like classically the director studio.
yeah,
Like they had Clint Eastwood for his entire career.
yeah, and it's a shame because to your point, Oppenheimer is a 3-hour movie, and it's a heavy personal piece. This isn't whiz bang pow. This isn't Batman. It's not Interstellar or Inception, where anybody can look at it, even if they don't like it. They can all go, "Yeah, I get it. It's a big event."
Yeah,
Oppenheimer is not that, and Oppenheimer is going against arguably the biggest cultural movie of the last couple of years in its opening weekend, and it's still doing well. And like Barbie's a great movie. Barbie is a cultural event that's been built in some ways for decades. People have been waiting for a movie like Barbie, and Oppenheimer is still this spectacle to people, and it's not a spectacle movie. It's a
yeah.
deeply personal movie.
The thing I'd say about Oppenheimer is like because this is the box office series, and this all came from me doing that spreadsheet of
Yeah,
the years according to the box office and stuff. Um, Oppenheimer really is an exception to the rule nowadays. Because back in the day, every single movie is like an Oppenheimer. It's like
yeah,
character study. It's an epic. Those were always big, Ten Commandments and stuff like that. But nowadays, that's a rarity. You rarely get a movie that's as successful as Oppenheimer was.
oh yeah.
So,
In that style.
I mean, I love that it was so successful.
I mean, it's a testament to. It's no different than the real reason that we're here for the show. It's The Dark Knight, but it's a testament to quality. The story. I
Yes.
go back to, as flawed as he's made some films, I always go back to the quotes of George Lucas, because in theory George Lucas is so good. He is such a good theoretical thinker when it comes to the ideas of movies, in which he's like, the story is the story is the story. You serve the story. And when you are given a tremendous story, like an Oppenheimer, or in this case, a Dark Knight, the story will ultimately win if it's told well. And when it's told this well, it will succeed at a level that people don't believe it can. The Dark Knight. I think it's almost foolish for us to go through the whole movie of The Dark Knight like we normally do because it's so abundantly clear when you watch it. You don't need us telling you how good it is.
Yeah, there's only so much ways you can say it's a great movie.
Right. The Dark Knight is, when you look at a modern context, I'm trying not to overblow, but when you look at a modern context, The Dark Knight could be argued as the most important film of the last 20 years. You really can. Because of this, where The Dark Knight shifts the entire logic of thinking of the comic book movie and the comic book genre, which has then taken over the last 20 years of filmmaking in terms of box office, in terms of attention, and also in terms of critical care. Where now you don't go into when Batman 89 hits, people are surprised at the quality of the film for 89. And it's a spectacle movie, but no one's going through Batman 89 saying Michael Keaton needs an Oscar, everything about this movie's perfect, but whatever. They treat it with a lot of reverence and respect because for the time it was. Same thing, Superman did that in 78/79 because of its run. But The Dark Knight completely shifts people's thinking from this is a comic book movie for summer to this is going to be the major focal point for cinema for the next 15 where we are focusing on IP characters and all that. That's insane.
I would only argue with that because The Dark Knight doesn't do really anything innovative. I would argue probably The Lord of the Rings is probably more the movie of, or the trilogy, I guess.
Yeah, Return of the King, though, is like the movie. But yeah, I get it.
Because they did so much technical innovations during that it's like, that really stepped the industry forward. Yeah. And there's always movies like that, like Titanic and Avatar and stuff like that.
Well, the same thing. We've already covered one. As much as it's flawed, Phantom Menace. It's in there too. It's super influential into where things are going. It's just in terms of when you look at the relationship an audience has to a studio, and a studio has parasocially with its audience. It's hard to argue The Dark Knight is not that influential piece.
As a cultural thing, I would agree.
And then this is the first time. I think you can look at Spider-Man 2 and you can look at pieces of the X-Men trilogy and go, this deserves a lot more credit than it ever was given.
Yeah.
And
X2, yeah.
X2, beyond just a phenomenal introduction to Nightcrawler, X2 does a lot of good work about what does it mean to be the other? What does it tells you so many things about society and it does it well.
And grounding such a out there story.
Right. And it never will get the credit it deserves because it came out in X2 came out in what, 2003, I think? 2000.
Yeah, it was, I think it was 04 or 03.
I think it was 03 and then, Spider-Man 2 also is a great movie and of that era. And they're both movies that they up the bar and people say, well, they're really good. But they don't get taken seriously at the same level that they should. Whereas it takes The Dark Knight, it takes those movies to get to The Dark Knight, but then it takes The Dark Knight to finally break the glass ceiling and saying, no, we deserve it doesn't matter if there's a hero in this movie with a cape and a cowl. It doesn't matter if it's a cape or a mask or anything. These movies deserve recognition for being movies, not just superhero movies. And it completely changes the genre. And it's done through a quality that is hard to come by, frankly.
Yeah.
It's so
well, The Dark Knight, it's not really, it does it is a jumping off point really for like the prestige of superhero movies, you know.
Yeah,
But in terms of the filmmaking, it's really more of a it harkens back to like the big epics because it's so practical.
yeah,
Like, and that's why I love it because it just feels so real. Like nowadays, you wouldn't have that truck being flipped at all. That'd be 100% CG.
and it's
Everything on the everything on the I don't know what it's called in this the bike that Batman
the
rides.
Bat Pod. Yeah,
That'd be 100% CG. Like so much of this movie would not be practically filmed
yeah,
that it'd be a disservice almost. And that's why I love Nolan that he tries to get everything that
as
he
practical as
can
possible.
practically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I love the
Now
joke. I
he exaggerates to a point where it's almost disrespectful to his visual effects artist, but that's his like
if that's what it
his
takes,
style now.
if that's what it takes to get us those shots, it's almost a necessary evil.
I just feel for the people who do the visual effects in those movies where it's like, okay, you're kind of being disrespectful, dude.
Yeah, but no, it leads to the meme and the joke. Christopher Nolan nuked a city for in Oppenheimer
Yeah.
because he's such a practical, practical
Yeah.
guy. Like Christopher Nolan built a nuke and used it. I'm like, it's like, okay, let's bring it down. But it, it's the same thing. I didn't even bring it up, and we were watching The Dark Knight Rises right after, like I said, and that opening where they take the top off or they take the bottom off a plane in midair,
Yeah.
and it's all done practically. I was just like, "That's so good." She's like, this is such an amazing scene." I'm not prompting her. I'm not making her look for it. That's not usually her cup of tea. Her cup of tea is enjoy a movie, and if she finds something she really connects with, she'll talk about it. But she's not usually the type that's going to go through note for note with me. And she's like, "Oh my god, that scene!" And the same thing, the truck
Yeah.
flip. The truck flip is so good. Also, I do have to shout out a former city of residence of mine. There's so much Chicago in this movie, and I fucking love it. And it's done so well. And I'll tell you why. You drive on Lower Wacker Avenue, you will feel claustrophobic and you feel like you are going to die. And it builds tension in every single second you are driving down there. Because it feels like you are in the wrong place. You are about to drive into a U.S. secret military installation and you're going to get shot for finding a secret. That's what it feels like when you're on Lower Wacker. And for them to do a whole truck chase scene through Lower Wacker is so fucking brilliant. I cannot even describe it to you.
The what was it? Mission Impossible 6 steals heavily from that truck chase. I think the Fallout has a scene that's very reminiscent of it.
But I just want to go over some notes because, like I said, I think you and I have both agreed. It's stupid for us to go scene by scene by scene.
I have a question for you.
Yeah.
Why is anyone the Joker's goon? Like literally all he does is murder people.
Charisma.
But they don't question, hey, is he gonna murder me?
No. Well, also I think they did a really smart job of showcasing the Joker goons, the henchmen.
In this, they're like mental health.
They are severe mental health issue cases. They are.
But I'm talking more historically. Types. I'm talking more historically. The Joker.
Oh, like in a comic book?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, the comic book's ridiculous. Because and eventually it gets to that where you see less like Joker goons and you see Joker kind of tinkering and making his shit up for himself.
Okay.
Because I don't think it's a direct answer, but I think a lot of the smarter comic book creators start going like, why the fuck would anyone work for him? Like,
yeah.
What? Whereas like it, because there is no reason to. Everybody that works with the Joker in some way, shape, or form dies. Like,
Yeah,
and even if it's Joker not
like
doing it, it's Joker usually causing it. So
and then and then you would think like, oh, maybe financial goals or something, but then he literally burns the money in this
yeah, or then
movie.
in this movie he burns. That's the only thing that if I were gonna throw one dart at is it builds the character so well. I completely understand it. I may have just said like I may have thrown in one little. I kept a little bit for myself. Just I kept a little bit for what Gotham needs, but I'm burning
In
it all.
terms of in
But it
terms of
doesn't have the
him
same
standing for
impact.
yeah, as in terms of him just standing for chaos in this movie, it's a perfect like representation of that,
Yeah,
and it's such a strong symbol of that,
yeah,
especially when you see like the faces of the people whose money it was,
yeah.
where they're just like so crestfallen about it,
Uh huh.
and then he's just like doesn't give a fuck.
Yeah, it's so smart. It's so. I think the things I would love to just kind of briefly discuss. Um, the use of foreshadowing in this movie is incredible because you're not paying attention to it most of the time until you're sitting down and watching it for the umpteenth time critically like this, where you know they don't say Two Face right away, but Harvey shadowing. Oh, I hear they have another name for me, and Gordon's just like wouldn't know anything about it.
Is that a is that purely a movie? This movie thing,
What?
like the origin of Two Face?
No. Like in terms of the how the name is created or how the characters.
Not the character, the name. Because I was gonna say that is such a good creative way to insert that name into the movie.
It's pretty hard to know that for sure because of how many iterations of Batman you've seen. There is a. I think that the best would be the best Two Face story. If you really want to go deep dive into comics, is the Long Halloween. Um, that is such a good comic book art with some of the
It's
best art you could ever find. I mean,
it's one of the few I've read.
the Long Halloween is one of the best comic book stories you could ever find because it's not trying to be a comic book epic. Usually, when comic books are trying to be the epic of a time,
Hmm.
you kind of just go, "Okay, that's fun." Well, then when they just try to
Yeah,
tell their story, that's when they become the icon of the field. Hence the reason
yeah.
a
That
lot
should
of
tell you something.
oh, I mean, yeah, it's difficult when you go to set out to make an epic. One out of every 1,000 epics that were designed to be an epic are epic. Um,
Yeah, because
it's
I highly doubt Christopher Nolan in this went. I'm gonna make the biggest and best Batman movie of all time.
no,
He probably just thought of his movie and did it the best he could,
yeah, and that's
and then it just happened to be
right,
so good.
and that's where I think it's really unique and interesting. Um, to see they play with the name origin similar to that, if I recall correctly, in Long Halloween. Um,
Okay.
and they borrow heavily from Long Halloween in terms of the love interest being part of the reason that Harvey goes down the path that he does. Um,
Hmm.
but the origin of Two Face in terms of comic books is he's attacked while doing his job essentially, and that's always. Um, but yeah, such a smart way. But you have that comment. You have one that no one usually ever brings up is Alfred's comment about Rachel to Harvey. When Harvey's like, "Oh, any crazy ex," like it's overshadowed by any crazy ex boyfriend. The next line, but the line before that is, "Oh, I've heard so much about you. Whatever. You've known Rachel her whole life." And he's like, "Well, not yet, sir." That's such a
Mm.
smart way to do it because you just kind of like, you're like, oh, Alfred's making a joke, and then it's immediately brought up to another joke, and it's playful or whatever. And then if you
Well,
look at
not
it,
only that, it does work with the character too. That line, it's not just like put in there just for foreshadowing.
yeah,
It actually does make sense too.
it makes sense. And then when you look at it from a foreshadowing context, you're like, motherfucker,
Yeah.
it's so smart. Um, you know, the Wirtz and Ramirez are set up as rats so early in this movie.
That's the one storyline that I think is a little underdeveloped.
Which one?
And I think it's the Wirtz and Ramirez. And I think it's only underdeveloped just because it leads to like the most important plot point. Like their storyline is not the main storyline, which you would think would be the main. You would think the main storyline would lead to the most important plot point, but it doesn't. It's kind of a side story that leads to it, actually.
Sure.
So that's why. But that's a huge. Again, it's a huge nitpick.
I think it's more of
But it
the.
is developed.
I think it's developed well, and I think it takes you. I think it builds the place of paranoia so well. You know,
Mhm.
and the Ramirez is set up in the first scene with Gordon,
Yeah,
and you're just like, oh, that sucks. And and when you see it and you're analyzing it just as the scene, you just go, oh, see, Jim's got a heart. He cares about who he's working with. He cares about the people around him. That's why he does what he does. You're like, oh, that's nice of him to do, as he co-signs on a vigilante who beats the shit out of people for the right thing. You
yeah.
know,
He's a little too trusting, maybe.
it shows that Jim gives a shit. And then to have that pay off to where you get through that whole truck chase scene. Jim saves the day. And you're not paying attention to Wirtz and Ramirez. It's so easy to miss Wirtz as the driver of that
Yeah,
car when Harvey gets in. But then when you have Ramirez, it has that the only thing that hints at it is that lingering shot of about 2 or 3 seconds on Ramirez, where she doesn't feel good about something.
Mhm.
And later when she said, I didn't know what they were gonna do, it immediately puts Harvey in the position that he was right and makes the villain Harvey so much better. Because you know he's
Yeah.
right
And
in that moment.
actually, to contradict myself, maybe Nolan was actually going for that. Like he didn't want to hint so much at
Yeah.
that being the case, because yeah, that would probably tip him off a little too much. So I take back everything I just said. I have another question for you though.
All right.
Um, how big is Gotham?
How big is Gotham in terms of
Is it like
mileage
New
or
York?
people? Um, oh, let me see. Gotham is kind of like I always kind of see it as a cross between Chicago and New York, where it's not New York, um, but it has the grandeur of New York,
Hmm.
and it has a lot
Okay.
like the subways, the tunnels, that kind of stuff. Like
Yeah.
I like
That's why. That's what made me think it was the subway. I was like, how big is Gotham supposed to be?
yeah, Gotham is. I always look at it kind of like a cross between Chicago and New York. It's one of the problems I actually have in DC. If you're gonna make this DC fanboy poke holes in the DC fabric, is I can't stand that you are meant to know that Gotham, Metropolis, Coast City, Central Cities, all these fictitious cities that are the homes of these superheroes. I can't
Hmm.
stand that they're also in the same United States as New York, Boston, Chicago, Los Angeles. I'm like, just replace them. It would just
Yeah.
because like if you look at the fictitious Gotham, there's two states it could be. Um, I think officially Gotham is in New Jersey, so you're kind of like Okay,
Okay.
or I always look at it more. The first time I saw it was just when I was introduced to it. It always feels more Boston esque. At one time, I think it was put in Massachusetts to give it that like old world feel, all the way back to the witch
Yeah.
trials and everything like that. Um, that's how I always interpret Gotham, and then they kind of used like, and then if you look at like Batman versus Superman, which we've already covered by the way, and it's great, that episode. Um,
I was gonna say the movie's not great. No.
no, the movie's not great, but the episode's great. And we have more coming to you about Batman versus Superman. Um, there's a lot of Batman versus Superman fans out there that I did not foresee coming for. They were all kind. I do want to say that they wasn't Cole Sprouse again when we got discourse on Batman versus Superman. Everyone was kind, but I was flabbergasted to see how many people
Hey,
think it's
can I just give a shout out to Cole Sprouse's best friend again?
sure.
He's such he's such a nice guy. Such a calm gentleman.
Just really thoughtful about what they say online.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks for another short clip, by the way, Dylan. Appreciate it. But when I look at like they used in Batman vs Superman, they used Metropolis like Gotham, and they used Gotham like Bloodhaven. And Bloodhaven is the city across the bay from Gotham in the comic books, where it's the even more twisted, deranged place than Gotham, where Gotham gets the big shit, where Bloodhaven is just such a shithole that only bad things can happen. But because only bad things can happen, it doesn't get the same level of attention or traffic of bad things that Gotham
Okay.
does.
So so in the DC universe, Metropolis and Gotham are like stand-ins for New York and stuff.
I think that's how it was supposed to start because it was just big city. Oh, like
Okay.
Gotham's clearly a stand-in for New York. Hence the reason one of New York's tertiary nicknames is Gotham City. That's where the Gotham City names
Oh.
come from. It comes from nicknames and ideas about New York. Whereas I always view Metropolis more New York esque than Gotham.
Yeah. That would make sense too.
And it's just strange. Like I would love if I were working at DC to just fix that map. Like they're now DC's doing an event where they're making two universes, kind of like Marvel did, where Marvel had the 616 universe and the Ultimates universe. DC's now doing that. I don't know how I feel about it, but it's written by my favorite writer of all time, so I'm gonna give it a shot. So I'm like, eh. But I would love to if I were running DC and be like, let's make DC's official fucking map of the United States. Okay, let's do this shit. Let's
I mean, that'd be helpful.
let's fix this fucking thing so people actually can understand it. But I think that's a great question on your part with so many ferries and tunnels. I think it's also hard, not only being a Midwesterner, but being someone who lived in Chicago and then spent like I have friends who live in legitimate downtown Chicago
Mm-hmm.
where I have to go I have to go near Lower Wacker frequently to see some of those friends. I've been on the train system. I've done all that kind of stuff. And it's so difficult when you're looking at it and you're getting so used to the comfort of it and then all of a sudden you're like, ferry? Where the fuck are we taking a ferry to? Like, what are we going to Michigan? Like, no, like, and like you even see the skyline, you're like, this is so clearly Chicago skyline. This is such
Mm-hmm.
and like whereas The Dark Knight Rises does a lot more shots of New York skyline because they need all the bridges, they need all that kind of stuff. Plus, then you get Pittsburgh with the stadium and all that kind of stuff. Um,
Mm-hmm.
where like they mix so many cities together that you're like, okay, it's kind of a weird amalgamation
Yeah.
of it. Whereas The Dark Knight, Batman Begins is like this, but The Dark Knight is so Chicago, and then when they play outside of Chicago, just a hair, you're like, I see you, motherfucker. What are you doing? Um, but it is certainly an interesting thing to think about. And it's a great question when you're like, how big is this city? Because yeah, it's difficult sometimes when you're trying to apply logic to a situation that doesn't need it. You're like, how big is this place?
Well, it's only because Christopher Nolan is such a logical writer.
Yeah.
Like it, it is so grounded in reality, and
Yes.
that's what he's going for. That it's like you have to question it
Yeah.
because and that's kind of one of the things I don't like about Inception is that it's too grounded in reality that like you would think dreams like they can go do anything.
Right.
It doesn't go that far out there really in terms of
Ironically
a
enough,
dream.
when you have cities bending on top of each other, yeah, like
Yeah, like that's the most out there it goes.
yeah,
But um, but yeah, he's such a logical and grounded filmmaker that like you kind of have to question some of those things. But again, these are huge nitpicks. Like,
this is you trying to poke holes in
and
a near
I love this
Teflon.
movie.
Yeah, like it's trying to figure out ways that this movie's wrong.
Yeah,
It reminds me of a
well, it's not quite pointing out it's wrong. It's just kind of wondering things about it.
yeah. It's certainly like this is a level which again, shout out to the ONETA football show every Thursday. Well, actually, now every Monday and Thursday. But um, there's a story. It's about Ray Lewis. Ray Lewis, like that, people do not know. After every game, players are graded in the NFL by their teams and how they grade what they're supposed to be doing on each play. One time, Ray Lewis had a perfect game grade wise, which is like impossible. And his coach went back and watched the film like a ton, just trying to make sure he didn't have a perfect game. And he found literally one misstep where he didn't do the step perfectly. And he's like, that's a deduction. And like,
Mm-hmm.
that's what this feels like right now, where it's like, this is literally perfect. And you're going back being like, just make sure they didn't dot one I. Just make sure they didn't
Yeah,
cross one fucking T. Like I just need like that's what it kind of feels like when we do this. But again, it shows the beauty of this film and how perfect it is. Um,
yeah.
I think what's really fun about this is if you want to write, this is the movie to watch.
Well, especially the Joker scenes.
Eh,
Like some of his lines are like all-time great villain lines.
oh yeah,
The one I wrote down, which is actually my favorite in the whole movie, is "Would you like to know which of them were cowards?" Like that is such a good line to provoke someone who's a hothead.
yep.
Like that's so smart.
The dialogue in this film, I'm not kidding when I said it earlier. There is not a single ounce of fat on this film. There is not a single wasted second in this film. Like when I go and watch this movie, and again, it's gonna sound biased because I'm a Batman fan and I love The Dark Knight already, but tell me even a second of this movie that doesn't have to be in this movie.
And it's not overly long too.
No.
Because you could easily see where he would put in another 20 minutes.
Yeah.
Like Zack Snyder would put in another 20 minutes.
Zack Snyder would put in another hour.
Yeah, well, if he had his way, sure.
Yes.
But I'm just saying, like, even if he was just given the Dark Knight, he'd be like, okay, let's add some stuff.
Yeah, and that's the crazy part about this is there is not a single ounce of fat on this film to be trimmed. You need every single scene, and even the scenes that people are like, I highlighted these ones. There's a scene which it's when Bruce is doing the when Bruce is throwing the fundraiser for Harvey. And he comes out and he does the asshole Bruce Wayne, as we've named him, and he's making fun of Harvey, but then it's all to set up the fact that he actually believes in Harvey. Rachel comes out and says, and chastises him, and that he gets straight to the point. He's like, I meant every word I said. He's like, Harvey is the true answer. And you told me you were going to wait for the day Batman wasn't needed. That time is now. And it's because of Harvey. And then you're looking where you see Maggie Gyllenhaal's Rachel is right on the verge of really going, shit, he might be right. And I'm going to have to make a decision here. And in this moment, it looks like I might pick Bruce because we're in this tension-filled scene and we have our entire life's history together. And right when you think it could get worse, and the melodrama might start a little bit, Harvey comes in and takes her away. And he just accepts it. And even that scene that doesn't really have tension in terms of outward, bull at the horns, we're just constantly conflict. It still has this huge brewing conflict of two men vying for the same prize.
Mm-hmm.
And one woman has to make the decision.
You said the right word. It's not melodrama.
Yeah. And that it's the same one of another storyline that I think people would say is unnecessary.
Real quick.
Yeah.
I just want to give a quick shout out to the camera work in that party scene when the Joker enters. It's all handheld. It's so great.
Oh, it's
like
tremendous.
If you want to just study camera work, look at that scene. It's fantastic.
Well, I mean, that's another reason why I'm telling. Like when I say perfect, I mean it, because we're not getting a lot of the shaky action cam that this.
No, yeah, everything's clear.
That this series, rightfully so, gets criticized for from time to time. In which the Dark Knight really doesn't have that. Like, I was looking for it, trying to be critical, even when I'm being blinded by, freshly 16-year-old Evans watching this for the first time, going, "This is the greatest film experience of my life. The Dark Knight is truly one of the most important films and one of the most important pop culture things that's ever happened to me." Because I was already into Batman, I was already just looking for excuses to be into it, and then The Dark Knight just proved everything I thought right. And I was just like, there we go. But I'm looking for shaky cam, trying to find it, being like, oh, yep, see, too shaky here. Let's knock off a half point off the total grade of this movie, and it doesn't have it. And yet the things that people might say are getting close, it adds to the style of the movie. It adds to that panache that it has, in which it has a style of its own when you're not thinking of it. But it has it. There is that thing to it. And the action sequences are shot so well, but that party scene, like, those are the scenes I really love. Those are the fun scenes to write too. When you write a movie, it actually kind of sucks to write an action scene because
not only that, it's just like, right, in terms of like actual like Hollywood filmmaking, writing an action scene is pretty much pointless because it's all going to get changed when they're actually filming it.
Right.
It's all filmed by second unit, and it's going to be like completely changed from what the writer actually wanted or intended.
Yeah, and when you look at writing action, I find writing action not only to be very hard, but also somewhat laborious, because you're looking at, well, how does he get from here to here to here to here to? It's like, I need to. It's like you're almost doing this like 360 shot, and you can't just pan once 360. You have to stop, then stop.
It needs to carry momentum while having certain points that you need to hit.
Yeah.
That in a good action scene, because obviously you can have action scenes that are just awful.
Right.
Like a lot of Transformers movies are just awful action scenes.
Right.
But yeah, one of the things Nolan does so good is he perfectly lays out the scene so you understand the geography of the scene. You know, like, and that's something that Spielberg does in his action as well, which really works.
Yeah.
Like, the audience is never questioned, like, okay, where are we? What's going on?
Why are
Like,
we? Yeah.
it's easy to understand.
And that's part of the thing that sucks when you write action. Is, for those who don't know, I wrote 3 Batman movies as part of a college project. It's just a labor of love. What I did, and when I wrote, it was part of an independent. It was part of an independent study. And again, I'm not fucking Christopher Nolan. I can't write at that level. I'd love to be able to say I could. I can't. But the tasks are still the same. Action sucks to write because it's just like you said. You have to carry momentum, but you have to hit certain points. You have to realize the goals, but do the goals align with the? It's a whole thing. The things that are really fun to write are the things that you think going in are going to be boring. You think that scene that you just discussed with the camera work in terms of the party sequence, you think that's easy. Joker enters scene, everyone is scared. He intimidates someone, Rachel stops him. We then get to our conflict of Rachel and the Joker. I just summarized that scene in a paragraph. But what makes that scene fun is all the little nuances, all the little details. And it's the stuff that makes you really love it because that's where character work comes. That's where the nitty-gritty comes in, where it's so much fun to write those sequences where you get to play in a world where you didn't think you get to play in. And it's really fun to enjoy.
Can I just shout out 2 more filmmaking things that I love?
Absolutely.
I only noticed it because I was paying attention for it. In this movie, unless he's performing an action, the Joker is never filmed in anything wider than a medium shot. So, like, he's never shown in an establishing shot or a long shot or anything like that. He's always in a medium or most of the time a close-up, unless he's doing an action. You know, like when he's shooting the gun at the ground.
Yeah.
When Batman's riding at him. Or like when he's shooting the bazooka. Like, obviously those are long shots. But, like, he is constantly in medium or close-up. Which is just... It's a great way to... I don't want to say make him sympathetic. But let you understand the Joker more.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like challenging you to not sympathize with him a little more, because really that's what close-ups do. It allows you to connect to a character more.
Yeah.
And they're doing it most with the villain of the movie.
Right. And
because they rarely do it with Christian Bale.
Yeah. It is that's such a great thing that I never even thought of. Thank you for pointing that out.
Well, yeah, I just noticed it because I was like, his first scene. What's his first scene? Oh, his first scene in the bank is when they reveal that tight close up on his face when he pulls the mask off.
Yeah.
And then I was like, and then the next scene it was another close up. I was like, wonder if this is gonna follow through, and it did.
I think the thing that's really smart about this movie is, it's another reason why I think the trilogy works really well, is you're working on characters and point of view. And what's so unique about this film is really this story is not about the Joker at all. It's so strange because he is the major driver. He is the reason that we're all in this situation. What have you?
He's the catalyst to the story.
He's the catalyst to everything. Yet, this is really a story about 3 men trying to solve problems and doing it in their own way. Where you have Batman, Gordon, and Harvey. And what I love about it is if you take the trilogy as a whole, this is the second act, in which the second act is usually the best part of every movie for most people, because it's where you get the real
Usually,
meat.
yeah.
It's where you get the meat. It's where you really get to sink your teeth into something. And it's so clear what the three acts in this film are. It's so abundantly clear what three acts are. If you were to say, what's the end of Act 1 in this movie, what would you say it is?
Well, I'd have to think about it. I'd have to go back to my notes. The problem is I didn't write much about the plot. Actually, I wrote things like Nolan is deceptively funny.
Yeah. I mean, I would say the end of Act 1 is pretty much Lau getting back to Gotham, because it wraps up almost all of that. It wraps up
I
pretty
guess
much
you could
all of
say,
that, and then it's Joker time.
yeah. I guess you could say each plot point involves the Joker.
Yeah.
Like each like big plot point, the turning points.
Yes. And then Act 2 is obviously the death of Rachel and the turning of Harvey. That's
Yeah.
the end of Act 2. But what's so crazy is it's a definitive three-act structure. And being a part of a trilogy, what's really fun is when you look at this trilogy as a whole, it's literally build confidence, break confidence, rebuild confidence. That's the whole movie. That's the whole story, right there.
True.
It's 6 words. That's it. Because it's simple, straightforward to understand storytelling. And even those things that you think you don't need, you do. Like, that's the crazy part about the simplicity, is when you're going for simple, sometimes it's really easy to say, do we need that? And then you lose something when you cut it. The only other scenes I wanted to even bring up is such a small one, is the accountant, Coleman, or Coleman Reese, I believe, that
Oh yeah.
a lot of people would probably argue that's a needless plot point.
Mm-hmm.
I completely disagree with it. Because it builds the tone and tension of paranoia to which even the most insignificant player in this film has to be subject to the major catalyst and has to build towards something else. Where they literally, like, in that scene, Gordon is getting ready to raid the place that Joker theoretically burned all the money. He's going to go get the Joker, and he has the entire police force there. And then, like Joker says, you just say, I'm going to take out one, everyone loses their mind. And he just says, if you tell everyone I told you to tell, and you don't die, you're all going to suffer. Then everyone just goes,
well, yeah, and the thing is, he has a point.
Yeah.
Like, it is true.
And
I wrote down, to get political for just a second. I wrote, this movie reminds me of a certain president, or an ex-president, I should say, that inciting violence, you can incite violence just by threatening violence.
What a shock. Who'd have fucking thought?
I know. It's just like, it's so funny how people can't see that.
Well, I always rely on a Tom Segura line. Some people suck. Once you understand that, life's a lot easier. Because it's easy to understand. Some people suck.
Yeah, that's true.
Some people are cool. Some people are dicks. It's so easy.
But that's probably my favorite aspect of the Joker storyline, is the parts when he's threatening violence, and because he's threatening violence, it just turns into chaos. Like, and real, true chaos.
Yeah, no, I thoroughly enjoy every single syllable of dialogue. And that's the crazy part. The Joker is a character that you can have fun with. That character is designed to have fun with.
Yeah.
To write it
Well, I
in a
mean, just
way.
look at Nicholson.
Oh yeah.
Like, compare the two.
Well, that's the thing is, Jack does a very, it's a modernized version for the time, but very faithful interpretation of
Sure.
of the Joker. And I think it's great. I love that interpretation. Now you can say, by modern standards, it's a little hokey or whatever the case may be, but because it's Jack Nicholson, it still has that sinister nature that the Joker has to have.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, they're diametrically opposed on the spectrum of where they are. Where the Joker is not outwardly funny in this movie at all. He's not trying to be funny. He's trying to be sinister, and then what makes him funny is some of the shit that happens as he's trying to be sinister.
Yeah. And it's just, Heath Ledger's charisma is, at times, he's just good at being funny.
Yeah, but it is so enjoyable to watch. And
just to shout out that second filmmaking aspect.
Yeah.
I just wanted to shout out the sound. It's so easy in especially genre movies to be like overindulgent. Like, I love the movie, but like, think of the Batman. Like, some of the sound in it is like overindulgent. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, there's nothing in this that is overindulgent. It's not like stuff that would hurt your ears in real life kind of hurt your ears a little bit in this movie. Yeah. Like, I'm thinking of like that the part when Batman's investigating that bullet fragment.
Yeah, that sucks.
Yeah, it's like that is a loud gunshot.
Yes.
And it's like, I kind of like that. It's really realistic.
Yeah.
And it's, I mean, obviously it helps Nolan ground the movie more, but you don't see that a lot in genre movies.
You don't. And it's, you feel the impact. Where what's insane is, in this movie, you have trucks being flipped over, helicopters crashing, ferries being rigged to blow up, and an entire hospital is blown up.
Mm-hmm.
And yet, scale-wise, you can still feel a single gunshot that doesn't hurt anybody. You can feel when Batman punches somebody that it's important, that it matters.
Well, those, like that hospital blowing up, it'd be so easy to just overblow that.
Right. I love
crank it up.
I love the fact that the sound is done so well on that. The practical effects are used so well on that.
Yeah,
that's insane. And I love the scope shot, where you see he blew up a single building on the hospital, but the other part of the structure is still fine.
Mm-hmm.
But an entire patient wing of that hospital is gone. And so there's still a reality to it where you could accept he didn't level it like a nuke, Yeah. He just took out what he could. Everything about that is done so well. And the sound and the sound mixing is tremendous. The use of the score.
I know Nolan gets a lot of flack for the sound in Dark Knight Rises.
Yeah.
Everyone says it's overcranked, but it's been a while since I've seen it, so I don't know.
Here's the thing. I think what's hilarious to me is the Dark Knight, like I said, so many people consider it to be one of the best of the best of the best, right? The Dark Knight Rises is legitimately great. It is not a bad movie in any way, shape, or form. There's a few things that you have to go, what? And that's what takes it from, if the Dark Knight's here, Dark Knight Rises by itself would be probably here, right? And then with some of those problems, it takes it down to about that. But people act as though it's like it went from like here to here, where it's like it's not even good. I'm like, did you watch the
Yeah.
movie? Do you even understand what we're talking about? And yeah, like there are more issues in The Dark Knight Rises than The Dark Knight. But when people want to say it's like a 10 out of 10, it goes to a 5 out of 10, I'm like, you're out of your fucking mind. Like, do you understand Christopher Nolan's almost, if Christopher Nolan asleep could make a 7 out of 10 movie? It, like, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Like, I mean, his worst movie is a lot of people's best movie.
Oh, yeah. No shit.
And that's from the very start, which is fucking impressive.
Yeah. Christopher Nolan is the filmmaker of our time. He is our generation Spielberg. It's who he is. And it's
Yeah.
just, it's the beauty of what we've been given. So many good plot points, so many good notes. I love the constant breaking and challenging of character morals. I love the Joker's impact on all of these characters. I love how everybody has to challenge their own belief system so much.
Mm-hmm.
I love how Bruce has an ace in the hole almost the whole time, and it's only after he loses everything that he just goes, fuck it. I have to do this. And he spies on 30 million people. Right?
Yeah.
And that's not what he stands for, but he has to do it. I remember first watching this when Gordon at the end is fighting with Batman saying, like, we have to do this. You can't go in there. And then he's like, and then he says, we have to save Dent. I have to save Dent. And it just so boils down that character to where the one piece of trust that cannot be broken is Gordon and Batman. It cannot be broken. And even that has to be challenged. I remember the first time I watched it, I was like, why would you even challenge Batman? That's so dumb. But then when you're put in these circumstances, I completely understand why he'd be like, everything's getting to me. Everything I'm doing somehow gets thrown in my face. We have to take the opportunities we have now to strike and be done with this. I just adore everyone being challenged that way. Oh, it's so good. So good. So fucking good. Now, we have 2 questions for box office. I'll ask the most rhetorical question ever.
Hey, 1 second.
Go for
Should
it.
I, just because it's in front of me for a different project, should I read the nominees that got Best Picture nominees instead of The Dark Knight?
I would love to hear it so we can shit all over them.
Let's see. Well, I know Slumdog Millionaire won that year.
Okay.
So it's Slumdog Millionaire, The Curious Case of Benjamin Button, Frost Nixon, Milk, and The Reader. They're all solid movies, honestly, but I wouldn't say any of them are standouts.
Yeah, another thing to go back to a previous conversation we were having in this show about status of superhero movies and everything. The 2009 Oscars ceremony where Dark Knight not only should have beaten everybody out for Best Picture, but then when you look at the competition, the only reason I haven't watched the majority of those films. I've seen a lot of clips of them. I know a lot about them. It's not to belittle the work that was done on those movies. Like you said, they're all solid to good movies.
Yeah, I actually do enjoy all those movies.
Right, okay. So they're not bad movies in any way, shape, or form. Right? And people can say a lot about you. You have done an enormous deep dive into Oscars history and really like that's
my homework.
That's your passion project. That's what you love to do. But when a solid to good movie is nominated and then wins above The Dark Knight, like What are we talking about? Like, what are we doing?
Yeah, the downfall of the Academy is always just like it's so easy for them to get manipulated by like the Harvey Weinsteins of the world, people like that who like put so much into campaigning for stuff where no one's actually just taking the films on their own merit,
Yeah,
which is the annoying. That's the annoying part of the Oscars, and it's like if you're just looking at yeah those six movies, those five plus The Dark Knight, pound for pound, it's pretty easy to tell which one's the best.
it's abundantly clear. It's abundantly
Obviously,
clear.
it is. It's obviously somewhat subjective. All movies are,
Right,
but I think most people would say The Dark Knight is probably the best of that bunch.
right, and that's where people lose credibility, and it feels then like when you might start getting things correct, it feels almost like makeup work, where
Yeah,
I look at it. Granted, the Dark Knight is the reason they expanded to 10 films, not five. Um, I will never change my mind in that. Anybody who wants to
well,
tell me, oh, they changed from that because of so many movies, I'm like, bullshit. They did it to save their asses because of how many fucking times movies like The Dark Knight don't even get nominated, and people of the general public have to go, are you serious? Like, we can
it's
all see
actually
it.
8 to 10 movies now.
8 to 10 movies, right? And
Yeah,
I'm sorry. That's like The Dark Knight is the movie there, like, because wasn't it only a year later or 2 years later they switched? That's the
it's
movie
a
that,
year later.
yeah, that is
The
the
next
movie
year.
where literally the entire movie going public, whether they're base movie people who never go to the movies and only watch stuff on home video or
Yeah,
whatever, to
the
your
next year.
ultimate
The next
hero.
year had not.
That is the movie where everyone goes, "Shut the fuck up, you idiots!" Like, and stops taking some of what they do
Well,
seriously.
but that it's more the Dark Knight was the boiling point
Yeah,
because there's always been that argument of like they leave out so many deserving films
right,
and sometimes put in movies that have no right being there.
right.
But yeah, like the Dark Knight is so obviously a Best Picture caliber movie that it's like okay, this is getting to the point where it's a little ridiculous, guys.
Like a little ridiculous, yeah, and that's the worst part. Is I think you're right. Boiling point is the one where it's just so long. You're
Yeah.
like, that's what the Academy does. That's what the Academy does, and then eventually you just have to go. What are we doing? It's. I
Mhm.
have the same feelings talking about sports. I have the same feelings talking about so many different things where when people don't want to talk about such an obvious, obvious flaw, I'm like, what are we doing? Like,
Yeah.
what are you talking about?
I mean, obviously the Oscars don't actually mean that much in the overall world. Like,
Right,
honestly, they don't have any meaning. Let's be honest.
right. It's more so
But
what we give meaning to. Yeah,
yes,
and that's
yeah.
why I said, like, going back, Black Panther was nominated for Best Picture. I love Black Panther. It's a really good movie. I don't know if Black Panther is a Best Picture nominee,
Nope.
but it, I just go whole like that's where it sucks because once they fix the rules to where you're like, okay, we're gonna start throwing some of these movies that are really popular in, then you just go, well, what, uh, uh, how,
I
what,
just think
where,
it
why?
is kind of weird though that like the word of mouth obviously worked so much in Heath Ledger's favor,
Right,
but not the overall movie's favor, which
right.
is weird.
Well, that's where it feels. I think that's part of the reason, like in terms of another thing that I was talking about in terms of impact, is another reason why I just got so frustrated with the Academy around that time was just I was like, it feels like you're like in terms of the Academy giving the award, right? It's abundantly clear the best supporting actor is obviously Heath Ledger. That like it's not even a
Yeah.
question. So they had to do that. It felt like, well, we got to do this one because if we don't do this one, we're going to be burned at the stake. But we're not going to give in on something else that we will never do. And it just felt like popular. It just, for a long time, it always feels as though popular movies, pop culture movies, just because they are pop culture movies, will never be rewarded in the Academy's eyes.
Yeah, and another aspect is like obviously every single year gets wrapped up in like the politics of the time.
Yeah.
And I don't just mean like actual politics. I mean like sometimes they'll give an actor an award just because it's a legacy award. Like they should have won it then, but we'll give it to them now because they do deserve an Oscar.
Right.
Like Al Pacino is the perfect example of that, where he deserved it for Godfather 2, didn't win it, and then they give it to him for Scent of a Woman, a much lesser role. It's just like, yeah, obviously, these people have their bias. People have things they think about other than just the performance or the movie or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's difficult. It's so difficult. It's something to think about when you look at films and you critique films. Because, like you said, all at the end of the day, it comes down to subjectivity. And
Yeah.
I don't know if I've met a single person who's watched The Dark Knight who even kind of goes, eh.
Yeah, I've never met anyone who dislikes it.
Yeah, I don't know if and it's granted, I understand we all run in social circles, but I have never even seen a comment online where people go, that movie's meh. Like,
Yeah. Well, it has a 9.0 on IMDb.
well,
And that, I mean, when you look at IMDb, like that's crazy.
yeah,
I think The Godfather has 9.2, and then the other movie above it is Shawshank Redemption.
pretty good company.
Yeah. So it's like, yeah, it's a good movie.
And all due respect to The Godfather, because I do love The Godfather, I would say The Dark Knight's a better film.
I wouldn't, but that's subjective. Yeah.
I think it's just so much more efficient, and it's just
Oh, I'd agree with that. Sure.
and it's just done so well. But again, subjectivity. That's how it goes. Let's ask these two very rhetorical questions on this film. Was this worth the box office that it made?
Obviously.
How much did this movie make?
1 second.
I was gonna say.
Let me grab that.
Thought it was like, did it crack $1 billion? I think I can't remember if it cracked $1 billion or not. In first run,
I'm fairly certain in first run it didn't.
I thought it went to like 880 or something like that.
I'm pretty sure. Yeah, because I don't have it written down actually. I'm pretty sure it's like right during first run. I think it hit like 850 million.
Yeah,
which
2008 money.
Movies, movies were not hitting $1 billion that often back then.
Right. So obviously, is it worth it? Did it get around the right number? I think is the second question, and obviously, it's worth way more than it even got.
Yeah, I mean, if this came out now, I would imagine it would probably make somewhere in the range of $1.5 billion.
And say, I think it's a safe 1.1. The only thing I think the only thing that might hold it back, in terms of this moment in time, is the superhero fatigue that we have.
Sure.
I think that might be the only thing that holds it back. Because I look at something like the Batman. The Batman deserves to be a $1 billion film, and it doesn't get there. And I think the Batman is a perfect testament to both how superheroes are evergreen, but also modern pop culture. There is superhero fatigue because it deserves more than what it got, but it got such a good number even during that time. It shows how strong the characters are and everything is. But this is so abundantly, clearly, so good in so many ways that you can't even argue it. I mean, it's just phenomenal at its core. Um, yeah, what a good movie. What a good fucking movie, to say the least, dude.
Okay, so I just pulled it up. I don't know about initial run, but now it's made 534 million at the domestic
Holy
and
shit.
473 at international. So it's just over $1 billion worldwide.
And it hasn't gotten it hasn't gotten the re-release treatment that some of these other movies have.
Yeah, no, I think it's been re-released more around the world than it has in the U.S.
Right. Like that this isn't a movie that this isn't Avatar, right?
Yeah,
This isn't Infinity War where they just try to compare dicks to see who can make the most money. Where every time it looks like Avatar is going to take it, Infinity War comes back to a select theater run. Every time Infinity War takes it, Avatar takes it back. Like, talk about a movie I think doesn't deserve its credit or doesn't deserve its box office, but that's a different story for the next year in film. But nonetheless, or maybe 2 years down the road. But this is 2008 is quite possibly the highest mark we're ever going to get in terms of quality for the box office film that we have. And we have a lot of heavy hitters coming, but that's
also,
the one.
Just because I have it written down, this is a more Oscar talk a little bit. Those 5 nominees I talked about, the Slumdog Millionaire was the highest peak it hit was 27th in terms of box office. The Curious Case of Benjamin Button, the highest it hit was 44th.
Wow,
Milk,
that was a big Christmas release too. That's kind of crazy.
yeah, but you have to think like because it was 55th in 2008 when it was released, and then 44th in 2009. But Milk, the highest it hit, 132.
It's still
And
pretty impressive for a
then
movie like
the
that.
Reader 90th, and then Frost Nixon 195th. So yeah, they definitely weren't rewarding big box office hits at the time.
No, it's not what they do. It looks like it's gotten slightly better. Glad Top Gun Maverick got a nom. Obviously, they couldn't deny Oppenheimer. Oppenheimer was what it was, but it fits the Academy movie more than it fits the big box office movie. It just happened to be both. It's kind of crazy how that worked.
Yeah,
Christopher Nolan, right there for you, baby. Now we are not actually going to have a big box office show until next month, which is crazy to say, but I'm going to unveil what we're going to be doing over the next month. Dylan and I have been discussing this. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Should I randomly generate the next one?
Yes, let's do that. Our next randomly generated one does not come to us until the start of November, which is insane.
We got 2012
Avengers,
which is
Avengers.
The Avengers.
Yes.
Now looking forward to that.
It's gonna be fun for me because I love going back and comparing the older stuff. I'm also getting ready sometime in the next month or two. I'm probably gonna be doing a big stack ranking of all the Marvel movies. And I'm someone who does not just put Avengers near the top just because it was the first Avengers movie. I let it be where I think it deserves to be. Now, granted, I already shocked you with my Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings conversation, so take that with a grain of salt, however you want to say it, but it's going to be fun talking Avengers with you. And that episode actually comes out on November 2nd of all. So,
and I promise we will have opposing views on that.
We will. Also, I mean, shit, we had opposing views when we first went to the theater together to watch it because you fuckers lied to me and got a 3D screening when I couldn't watch a 3D movie. So,
yes.
So I suffered through a 3D movie with you because Avengers was that special. because your boy has migraines and they were untreated at the time, and I got a migraine watching Avengers, and it was worth every second. But I was in pain so much of that movie. But nonetheless, good times and good fun going through. The next couple episodes we have. Are you ready for this, Dylan? Well, of course you are. You helped me make this. Next episode, we're going back to the cult classic series, and we are finally watching Monty Python and the Holy Grail. It's going to be fun. Classic comedy, one of my favorite comedies of the time. Going forward with that one. After that, we're going to be following up on last month's probably biggest episode that we've ever done. And we are rewriting Batman vs. Superman, which I have been working on diligently. Are we both making one, or do we just say I'm making this and you're kind of reacting to it?
I don't know yet.
Depends on if you want to rewrite it or not.
Yeah, because I have other things I'm writing, so right. I don't know how much effort I want to put into it.
Right. And so
I'm sure I'll have ideas, though.
Right. I'm not going to, and just to be clear, I'm not rewriting word for word, page for page.
No, not a script.
It's not a script, but this is pretty much a defined outline of what the script would be. But we are rewriting Batman versus Superman. It's going to be really fun. That's going to be the 21st episode. And then coming out September 28th, we have to prepare you for my favorite season of movies for Halloween time. So Dylan and I are both creating a 31-day October calendar of movies for the Halloween season, which is going to be really fun and enjoyable because they're going to be probably wildly different about how we approach this.
Oh, yeah.
We're not talking about anything structure-wise. It's just, Dylan, give me 31 days of movies. Evan, give me 31 days of movies. So we're going to.
I will spoil now. There is a structure to mine, but it's not what I don't think anyone would be able to guess it.
Interesting. I think there will be a structure to mine. I'm sure people could figure that out quickly if they thought about it for more than 2 seconds. But that is going to be a lot of fun. And it's been a lot of fun talking to all of you. Dylan, do you have any more closing thoughts on The Dark Knight or anything going forward that we need to say?
Nada.
Watch The Dark Knight. It's movie perfection. And if you don't believe me, I don't know what to tell you, dude. it's legitimately perfect. And that's the way it goes. Just like here, that's the way it goes here on the ONETA Movie Show. Thank you guys so much for watching. We appreciate you watching or listening wherever you are. If you want to stay in touch with our socials, TikTok and Instagram, and see clips of the show there. We're going to be getting some new graphics pretty soon, which is going to be really fun. Getting a lot of new intro stuff. It'll be really cool. Check that out. Go check out the rest of our podcast. Tuesday, you got the ONETA Show, which is our flagship. And now Monday and Thursday, you get the ONETA Football Show because it's football season. So now magically I have to talk about it more. But it's also going to be really fun. So go check that out. And you can go still see a lot of cool rotational stuff. Sundays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, all on the PTA Creative channel. Go check us out there. And finally, if you want to support the channel with some actual dollars, because we're here for money, bro. This big box office, we're here for money. You can't even let me take the ad read serious. Go to ptcreative.etsy.com. Go get yourself some cool merchandise. It's all stuff that revolves around the channel content. Please go help us out there. We would greatly appreciate it. Thank you so much for watching. Peace, love, and hugs to you all. Go watch a great movie. Bye. Bye.